Okay. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for being here for this month's Counselor Connect session. My name is Amanda Callahan. I coordinate Counselor Connect, which is a statewide community of practice for student service professionals. Joining me today to share self-care in a selfless field is Jennifer, and I'm going to skip forward to some of the titles that Jennifer holds. She's at the Greenfield Central High School. She is a Gold Classroom teacher, behavior coach, wellness committee member, and is a part of the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. So she wears lots of hats, and I'm sure she may share a little bit more about herself as she gets started. But we are glad to have her with us. This session will be recorded and available on demand. So if you, for some reason, need to leave early, or if you want to share this later on with colleagues, it will be available for you to do so. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jennifer to get us started.
Hello, everybody. As she said, I'm Jennifer Hassan-Maciejewski. I am currently at Greenfield Central High School. My future is unknown right now, though. So my family lives an hour and 15 minutes south of here. So I'm driving and commuting every day. So we'll see where the wind blows me next. But yeah, behavior is my jam for sure. I tried teaching first grade once, and those were dark times. I've tried co-teaching, and for me, I just end up focusing on behavior in the classroom. And so I kind of randomly just had a knack for it, mostly because I was maybe a student who needed to have a behavior person in the room when I was in high school. I found myself in a lot of random trouble situations, nothing too crazy, but enough that I was out of class more than I was in. You know, I failed a couple classes. At one point, I tricked the office into thinking I was an office assistant for about 9 weeks until the teacher caught me. So I was really, I kind of had I have all the tricks up my own sleeve. So it's easy to kind of pull them out of other kids and find ways to help them. I live outside of the box in terms of behavior, but on top of that, I noticed for me as a behavior coach going into the classroom that a lot of what I was seeing was coming from the teachers. Yes, the students have behaviors, but also it seemed to me like, you know, I would catch a teacher on a bad day, or I would say, hey, you know, what's going on with you? I noticed this is how you responded to this, which then sent me on this whole spiral of wellness. I'm also a trained yoga, mindfulness, meditation instructor. So I kind of just live in that world of behavior and wellness, and how a lot of what we do can change just from a mindset shift. And that includes self-care, which I know so often we hear is kind of like, oh, more self-care, but no time for self-care. Oh, you want to have a meeting about self-care. Okay, yeah, that sounds like maybe I just need time to have self-care. But I think a lot of it just stems from a mindset shift. And if we can kind of look at self-care a little bit different than what the Twitterverse shows us, then maybe we can find something that works for us and is sustainable. Go ahead to the next slide. I am on the Twitterverse, and so I often like to give out gratitude journals, and I'll talk more about those later. But if you want to, if you feel so inclined, feel free to take a screenshot or take a picture and post it, and I will enter you into a drawing to win a gratitude journal. Usually with these things, there might not be a lot of people, so I just end up shipping them out to everybody. So feel free to email me later with your information if you really want a gratitude journal. I'll just send you one for funsies. So a lot of what I might say has the potential to ruffle some feathers. It has the potential to maybe make you feel uncomfortable, like maybe I'm calling you out. I am not calling you out specifically. We're not good enough friends for that right now. But know that if you are feeling kind of attacked in the moment, or like, she's talking right into my soul, then that might be an area of concern for you, an area that you need to dig a little deeper in. In the yoga world, I say, if you hate downward dog, it's because probably your muscles aren't loose enough, and you need to maybe do more downward dog. So if you're feeling like that little, ooh, who is this lady? And why is she saying that about me? Is she talking about me? Who told her? Then maybe you need to take a look at whatever we're talking about and kind of dig a little bit deeper and ask yourself maybe a few more reflection questions in that moment. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, here we go. We're jumping right in. To hell with martyrdom. Pardon my French. Martyrdom is a close relative to the office workaholic. Work martyrs are employees who work themselves to the bone because they believe sometimes that maybe they're the only ones in the company or in their department that is capable of doing the job to their standards. I say that sometimes like, well, anybody can do the job, but not to the way that I like it to be done. Having a martyrdom mindset, though, leads you to burnout, and research indicates that teacher burnout negatively impacts student learning. And you might be like, yeah, duh, like that's obvious, right? But your choice to work nonstop and serve your students might be having the opposite effect. And that's something that sometimes we might not notice until we're in way too deep, or until we have a kid who's like, well, you don't have it together all the time. Why do I need to have it all together all the time? And then you're like, oh, dang. But studies show that 78% of teachers feel exhausted by the end of the day. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but I can. And then I've got my hour and 15-minute drive after to kind of decompress. But I take my 4-year-old with me. So she's in the back and we're jamming to music, and it just feels like I'm still on. So I don't even know if it's really decompressing for me. But both physically and emotionally, that's 78% physically and emotionally feel exhausted by the end of the day. The impacts of the exhaustion include increased illness, absenteeism, right? Because we're sick, or maybe we need to take a break, or maybe we just need to, maybe we are actually sick because our mental stress is affecting our physical bodies, which, and we know there's a correlation between the two. Cynicism, right? That negative lunchroom chat sometimes we find ourselves in. Poor decision making, as well as decreased energy and basically just job enjoyment. As you might imagine, this doesn't bode well for student learning when we're in the classroom. And we can really only fake it till we make it for so long until it catches up to us. Teacher burnout predicts student academic outcomes. And there is actually a correlation. There have been several studies that show that teacher burnout affects the student motivation and the stress of the students as well. So we're passing that on. Those kids, whether they're little kids or whether they're high school kids, seniors in high school, they know they have that weird, keen ability to know if we're faking it and to know if there's really something going on deeper with us, and they can pick up on that. And sometimes it's just that energy that we're putting out that we don't realize we're putting out that they're picking up on. And so it matters. And I know sometimes we want to be like, well, that's our job. That's what we signed up for. But, there's ways around that. Go ahead to the next slide for me. And you'll see a famous poster hanging, maybe used to hang in your room somewhere. I've seen it on teacher planners. I have, in fact, somebody wrote thank you cards for teacher appreciation. And Monday, this was in my mailbox. And I took it out, and there were some other teachers in there. I was like, get that out of your mailbox. And they just looked at me, and I said, this quote, I see it everywhere. I call BS. The idea that we need to sacrifice ourselves for our students does not feel inspiring to me. It does not feel like teacher appreciation. And I understand the concept behind it, but movies like Freedom Riders, Stand and Deliver, Dangerous Minds, the martyr in those movies is celebrated, right? That teacher who sacrifices themselves and their life, and sometimes even their marriage in some of the movies, that's celebrated. And while the movies are great, they do contribute to the problem, especially if we're a young teacher with that fire in our bellies to change the world. We feel like that's kind of, well, that's what the job is, that's what we do. And they make martyrs out of teachers who see their students sometimes as victims to be saved, which isn't always the case. But then as teachers, we get sick and we get burned out trying to save them. And that's not always the case. And so the lack of acknowledgement and even empathy that we see sometimes for teachers, and depending on your district, I know that there are some groups that we feel like are constantly maybe attacking our profession. They're attacking what we do and what we signed up for and what we love doing. And so sometimes that does exacerbate the whole martyr thing. Like, well, the whole world's against me, and I got to keep doing this, what I signed up for. And, oh, I'm so stressed out, but now I got to read all the comments. I got to go to the comment section to see what everybody's saying about my school and my district and my job. But the thing about martyrs, if you know anything about martyrs, is it's deadly. And so it's not kind of a world that we want to live in. Go ahead to the next slide. To find out if you're a martyr, you might hear yourself saying some of these things. No one even appreciates how hard I work around here. Or nobody in the community gets what I'm doing. I don't even have time to be with my own kids because I got to raise other people's kids. They're not even raising them at home. Now I got to be the parent and the teacher. I can't take a day off. My class would descend into chaos. If I'm not there, little Timmy he'll blow a gasket, and then it'll be a hot mess and everyone will have to fix the problem. I'm the first one in the building and the last one to leave. My car's the last one always in the parking lot. If you find yourself walking out to your car and you're the only one in the parking lot and you're like, yep, there I am again, working harder than everybody else around me. How do they get home? What are they doing? What am I doing wrong? How do they get their work done? And I got to stay here till 5:30 in the evening to get everything done. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. I had a teacher who didn't go until 8:30. When I did my student teaching, my teacher, my host teacher, I don't know what they call them these days, but my mentor teacher left every night at 9 o'clock. And I was like, listen, this isn't it for me. I can't do this. And she was like, you know what? I missed my kids' events. I missed my kids' graduation to be here for my students. And she said, don't do the same thing. And I'm like, well, let's go home together. Let's leave. You go your house. I'll go my way. We'll leave at the same time. Let's make a deal. And she never made the deal, but she quit that same year. So I like to think I forced her to retire. I don't know. Go ahead to the next slide. So what is self-care? One more swipe for me. I don't know if you're swiping or clicking. Sorry. Self-care means taking care of yourself. There's it. Thanks for coming to my talk. That's the whole message. Sorry for the bells. Taking responsibility for your well-being in all the important areas of your life, right? Sometimes we hear self-care and we think, oh gosh, I got to go run a mile. Forget it, I'm not doing self-care. Or we think, oh, I'm going to get my nails done. Well, yes, that is self-care. It's a little bit different than that. It's spending dedicated time getting to know who you are and what you need. For some people, yes, running a mile is self-care. For some people, yes, going and getting their nails done every week or however often you got to fill them in, that's self-care for you. But then committing to giving yourself what you need to be happy, healthy, and fully present in your life and not running on autopilot, which I think a lot of us, if we're being honest, will admit that we spend a lot of our time doing. I know it's May right now, so autopilot just seems like we just got to make it through those last few miles. We're going to get there together. I want to make it clear as we're starting this that self-care is not just about feeling good. Much of what you do for self-care will bring you pleasure, but this isn't always the case. Simply put, self-care isn't always fun. It's not always relaxing, and you won't always feel like doing it, which is, I think, something important to note. Go ahead to the next slide. Sometimes self-care involves forgiving yourself, setting boundaries. I'd love to see a show of hands. I can't see a show of hands, but I'd love to see how many people feel like they struggle with setting boundaries in the education world. Maybe it's so much as walking away from a job or relationship that you've outgrown. I know that is something that sometimes we find hard because we're like, oh man, I got to make it to get that 10-year, that 10-year clock or whatever we get for being somewhere for 10 years. I don't know. Not that I jump around a lot. I did work a job for 10 years, but it was a miserable job. And I left right before I hit 10 years because I said, there's got to be more in life than to waking up wishing I didn't have to go to that job every day. So I walked in and gave my 2 weeks notice, but boundaries aren't hard for me. So go ahead to the next slide. Self-care is about making yourself a priority, no matter your life circumstances. Self-care is fundamentally about bringing balance back to a life that has grown imbalanced from too many responsibilities and commitments. And I think if we set, for me, this is something that I keep on cards, like I print them out and then I make them almost as cards that I write to teachers that I feel like are maybe struggling with burnout, or they feel like they are, I can see them kind of teetering, or I'll walk down the hall and I'll be like, hey, how's it going? Like, oh, another day in paradise, or, oh, living the dream. Just, it is what it is, right? I can't complain. I could, but it wouldn't make a difference. All those things. Guaranteed about 3 to 5 days after that interaction, they will have this message in there with a little note on the back. And I just stick it in their mailbox. I don't sign it or anything. I just stick it in there because I think this is something that we all need to remember, that if we're feeling burnout or we are feeling like we are struggling with self-care, or we are just pouring ourselves into our job and nothing's coming back to us, then something's out of balance and we need to figure out what it is and find that balance in our lives. Go ahead. You can skip the next slide and go on to the next. This is how do you do self-care? Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and I add vocational in here, which was kind of a last minute throw in, because I think it's important that we think about self-care in terms of finding how that fits into our job. As a teacher, you likely know you need to take better care of yourself. You might have some ideas about what that means. Maybe eating better, which I know is hard because it's Teacher Appreciation Week and we're getting lunches and donuts and all all the snacks. But it's also sleeping more, maybe actually going to the bathroom when you need to go. I know that might be hard for certain teachers in certain situations, but I find that there's always a way if we're willing to find it. And so it might mean asking the neighbor next to you, being like, hey, I'm just running the bathroom real quick. I gotta go. Sorry. But so often the idea that, oh, now I gotta, that's sometimes in our brain, the idea of admitting that we need help, which is something we don't often like to do. I mean, even something as simple as like, if we're getting down to the honest facts of it, going next door and asking someone to watch your classroom, you feel like you're burdening somebody else, and they're going to be like, oh, I'm holding my pee. Why can't you hold your pee? You know, and whether they think those things or not, I don't know, but your self-care is more important. So, there's a full range of self-care and what that includes. Go ahead to the next. Let's start with physical. I'm not going to read all these to you. Teaching is a job that is mostly of the heart and mind, but it's our physical bodies that allow us to do the job at all. And so sure, it's less physical than being a professional football player. My husband is a 6A football coach, and he used to coach college at the beginning of our relationship. And some of the things that those guys had to endure, I don't know what that's like. I don't have to do those things, but you know, my body still gets me through my day. It requires us to take care of our bodies. Doing so allows us to do better, feel better, and perform better. But it's more than just joining a gym, sleeping more, or actually going to the bathroom when you need to. Go to the next slide, please. Exercise is something I know a lot of people are like, I don't have time for that. And a lot of people have maybe negative relationships with exercise. Maybe they've attempted weight loss and it kind of rebounds and doesn't go as well as they had hoped. Maybe they have a knee injury. Maybe their hip or back is bothering them. Maybe you have some wild childhood PE gym trauma. I don't know. There's lots of things that could be causing that problem, but I don't need to go into the benefits of physical exercise and regular exercise. It is important, but it's not always getting up at 5 a.m. to hit the gym. It's not marathon training unless you're marathon training, in which case it is. It's about finding something that fits into your lifestyle and making sure that it's sustainable. For me, you will always find my car in the very back corner of the parking lot, and it is just awful on rainy days, but I've committed to doing that, so I do it. And then of course my umbrella's in my husband's car or something. I don't have it, and I come in looking like a street rat or something, but it's it's fine. My kids know I'm coming in, rain or snow, I'm in the back parking lot, I'm taking a jaunt. Take the stairs. If you're maybe going to a doctor's appointment or something, take the stairs instead of an elevator. Join your students on a movement break. Don't just turn go noodle on and get in the back. I know it's a good opportunity to get copies ready and everything, or get reading groups ready. But if you feel so inclined, maybe do a tootie-ta with them and see what happens. I don't know if anybody gets that reference, but that was big when I was doing first grade. The Move It app is something that I actually don't present from my screen anymore, because every 10 minutes, something pops up on my screen. It completely shuts down my screen. If you don't have this, I'm going to tell you to get it because it's fantastic. It's called the Move It app. And what it does is it will you can set it to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 45 minutes, or whatever works best for you. And it will shut your screen down, and it will pop up, and it will just say, do 10 jumping jacks, or it'll say something crazy like, go find a student and walk over to the student farthest away from you and play a round of rock, paper, scissors and walk back. It just forces you to get up and go do something. A lot of times my kids will join in if my screen is up on the board and Move It comes on, they're like, yes, move it. And then we do it. And sometimes, if we're doing something super important, I'll push pause on it. But I find it to be fantastic. They like to word things weird, so that you have to think about it. Like, instead of a push-up, it's an up-down plank. And you're like, that's just a push-up. It's called that. And then sometimes I'm like, I'm not doing that. And if you're like, I'm not doing a up-down plank, then you can also just click, okay, done, and pretend. You can lie to it if you want to, but that's on you. You're the one sleeping at night. So Move It app, it's a Chrome extension. It's fantastic. There's lots of apps and everything for it too. So think about it. I know we have the watches that say get up and move, but I swear by the Move It app. And in fact, I keep telling our tech to put it on every teacher's computer and make it so they can't remove it. But he's not on board yet. We're almost there. Next slide, nutrition. I like to always drink my water first thing in the morning so that I have a better chance of going to the bathroom before the bell rings. So it doesn't hit me at 10:30. You don't need to carry an old milk jug around with you unless you want to. I have a friend who brings this gigantic jug into every meeting, and it's like, drink by 8 o'clock, drink by noon, and it's always full. And I'm like, you carry this everywhere, but it's always full. Are you refilling it? Because that's a lot of water. And I looked it up because I was curious one day. So the National Academy of Science recommends 91 ounces of water. And I'm reading this off of a slide right now because there's a lot of numbers in here. The science recommends 91 ounces of water a day for women, but that's your total intake, which includes non-water beverages, even caffeinated ones too. So we hear this big number and we're like, oh, that's a lot of water. I can't drink all that. So 20% of that 91 ounces comes from food too. So your food counts, assuming you're not just eating bread, I think. Subtract 16 ounces you're probably having from coffee or tea if you're me, and you're about 56 ounces or 3 bottles of water, which is way more doable than a full gallon of water, which something we're like, I gotta drink how many bottles of water? But broken down by actual National Academy of Science people say that we need to drink about 3 bottles of water. And that's women, doesn't matter what your weight is, 3 bottles of water. For men, the recommendation is 125 ounces minus all those other numbers I said, but I don't see any men in here, so I'm not going to do the math for them. And if you are in here, you can do your own math. I'll send you the details. Put food in your body in the mornings. Often it's easy to skip breakfast, but then we end up hangry and we don't know what's going on. And then we're like, oh, it's snack time. I'm going to eat all these snacks. And then they're unhealthy snacks because they're convenient. I like to not put pressure on myself to eat meals because I know that random things pop up. I'm behavior 911. Lunchtime is a lot of transitions for students. So I find that during lunchtime is when I'm never able to eat lunch. And so I eat a lot of random snacks. I try to keep healthy snacks in my room. But I also have a secret drawer of chocolate. So, balance, right? That's what it's all about. I also take vitamins, but that's me. And I think vitamins are super important. Choose your meals wisely. These are all things that I think we all know, but that often we forget. Things that we don't think about until we're at the doctor's or something. Sleep. I don't sleep often, and not because I struggle to sleep. I remember being 16 and thinking there are so many things I could be doing besides sleep, that now I have to almost force myself to sleep because I don't feel tired often, which I know like it's annoying to hear somebody who doesn't feel tired say, it's fine. You just find things to, help you sleep. But there are some things for me that work. My husband is an alien who is asleep on the way to the pillow and snoring, I think, still standing up. And so I can't take advice from him when he's like, what do you mean you're not sleeping? Like, I'm not tired. And he's like, you're not tired. And then he's asleep. But lack of quality sleep makes bad situations worse. That seems very clear to me, but you have less energy, less patience, and you're just all around. You feel like a less pleasant version of yourself when you're tired. And there's a reason some cultures use sleep deprivation as torture. That's what I always say to people, because, it matters. And teachers who don't get enough sleep report having more mood swings and health problems too. So there's a correlation between all of that. We should be sleeping, adults age 18 to 60 need 7 or more hours of sleep of night. I don't hit that. So it's a goal of mine to try to sleep more. I don't hit that mark. If you do, kudos to you. One study found that most teachers get maybe 5 to 6 hours a night. That profession in particular tends to sleep less than most others. And I don't know if that's because we're bringing work home. I don't know if that's because it didn't specify, if that's because we are worried. Maybe we're going through a list of the 100 things we need to do the next day. And maybe we feel like our job never ends. And so we're bringing it all home. These are just a few things that'll help you if you do struggle to fall asleep, or like I said, if you're not one of those magical creatures who fall asleep on their way to the pillow, then these are some good things to keep in mind. This is a chart that I had to make for myself. If you go to the next slide, you will see, for me, I don't want to tell you the longest amount of time it's gone between dentist appointments, but right now I do have 2 broken teeth. So, so I decided I had to make this list to remind myself to make all of the important appointments that I need to maintain my physical well-being. And so this will help me kind of hold myself accountable. I do it for my kids as well because I forget, honestly. I consider adding this. I tell teachers to add this to their planner or journal with a chart like this one. If you don't like this, you can put it in your notes on your phone. That's where I keep mine. But I don't I didn't use this for a long time. I would be like, I couldn't tell you the last time I'm not a doctor person. I just don't go to the doctor. I don't have weird fears about them. I'm not just a crystals and meditation person. Although I do like to find other ways around going to the doctor if I can, if I'm being honest. There's a little hint to who I am as a person, but it's important. I need to go to the dentist. I know that. I do have this in my chart, but I also keep putting it off. So as I'm going through this, I'm realizing I should probably go to a couple of appointments that I've been putting off. Thanks for the reminder, guys. Take the screenshot of this if you want to. I can also send this to you if you don't feel like making it, but it's a pretty simple thing that is really helpful. Here we go. Next slide. Sick days. I would like in the chat right now, just put a yes if you have 15 or more sick days saved up. Going into the chat. 15 or more. I know COVID took a slam on a lot of people. Yes. Okay. There's lots of yeses. Sick or personal. Yup. We got a LOL yup in there. Someone says no way, not me. Okay. 20 or more. Anybody? Yes. Oh, Daniel, I'll send you this. I'll send you how much water you need to drink. Sorry. Okay. 25. Over 100. Jen, stop it. Give us permission to use sick days for self-care. Ooh, I'm going to, but I'm not official. I can give you permission right now. Yes, do it. Okay. So anybody else over 100? Anybody? Just one. Okay. I did. Oh, is that a late yes or a yes over 100, Lori? Oh, okay. You got this. Gives me like, I think my neck is getting red. I can't imagine. I once had somebody answer 243 days. 243 days. I mentioned once on the social media, like I said, I'm on Twitter, and sometimes for funsies, I like to put controversial things on just to see what people say. It's a vice of mine. It's fine. I got a whole pile of comments telling me about the truly terrible situations that a lot of teachers are in terms of sick days. In fact, right now at my school, if anybody's in here, I'm not going to say anything rude about my school because I love Greenfield Central, but it is a big situation right now. So we had a lot of teachers taking off, and so they're kind of, all this thing started happening, and now there's a big revolt about, I don't even know what it is because I just know I'm going to take my days and whatever happens, happens. But a lot of people are in a lot of kind of crummy situations. Many teachers in the US get 0 days of maternity leave and are forced to hold their sick days to have any time at home with a new baby. That 10-year job I worked that I didn't like, I had 3 kids during that time, and I had about 2 weeks off for each child, and that was awful. Others have told me that they will get docked on evaluations for taking more than a certain number, even though we're legally entitled to those days. And I think both of those situations are appalling. That said, I do know plenty of teachers with more sick days in store than they could ever use up. So, some teachers seem to take a weird pride in having an enormous number of sick days stored up. And sometimes we just don't, maybe they just don't feel the need to take off. I don't take a lot of days off. I do sometimes come to work if I've got I'll fight through if I've got a cold, but I don't feel like a cold is enough to keep me at home. But I do take days off to go on hikes, and I tell them, they're like, what are you, sick or something? And I'm like, no, I feel great. Actually, it's just a sunny day and I could use a day off. And they just look at me like, what are you nuts? Yes, but also it's my day and I'm going to take it. There was a study that I found, and this is wild to me, that tried to measure teacher effectiveness by how few days off the teacher took. And I'm like, if that's not a guilt trip, I don't know what is. And if anybody wants to link to that study, if you're just feeling like being enraged, I'll send that to you if you're really interested. Insisting on going to work, somebody does. Kayla, all right, shoot me an email because I'll write a note, but I might forget. Insisting on going to work when you're feeling sick or exhausted day after day, year after year is not healthy behavior. I'm here to say it. I know it's easy to say that, but it doesn't make you a better teacher. It doesn't make you a morally superior person to come to work when you're sick. I see so many teacher memes floating around stating that it's easier to go to school sick than it is to make sub plans. And I'm going to say that, and I know for sure if I could see everybody's faces, a lot of you would be nodding, and a lot of you would be like, yep, right there. It's so hard to make sub plans, but I'm going to tell you it's not true. You can plan ahead. You can write easy, like fill in the blank sub notes now. You can Teachers Pay Teachers has some of those things, and a lot of them, if you type in sub plans free, they'll pop up. You won't have to pay for it. And I know it might take a little bit more work up front, like if you're doing it maybe in July or whatever, and maybe you're adding notes each time. But once you write those initial sub plans and you kind of make it in a fill in the blank format, it's easy to make them time after time. I know I usually lose a lot of people when I say that, but again, I always believe that to every barrier, there's a way around it. And again, coming to school sick is not modeling healthy behavior for our students. And I hear so often teachers are complaining, oh, I just don't know why they're sending their kids to sick. They can't learn when they're here sick and they're sniffling their nose and they're tired, the poor kids. And we complain when they come to school, but then we do it ourselves. And so I think it's difficult. But if you're a parent, with all of that said, if you are a parent or planning on becoming one in school or a district without maternity or paternity leave, I'm sorry. I know it's not within everyone's power to do so, but consider finding a district with better benefits, and be sure to let your school know why you're leaving if that's the reason that you're leaving, because poor working conditions don't improve if everyone just continues to put up with them, unfortunately. And again, I lose a lot of people here, and if I've got admin over here or anybody from central office, we can chat later. I don't mind, but I just I feel for the students and teachers affected by the situations, but I'm also not shocked to find that we're in a teacher shortage everywhere right now. I hope the shortage is a wake-up call for districts and politicians, because teachers taking care of other people's children all day should have the right to take care of themselves and their own kids too. And I think that's a frustrating point for all of us, and something that seems way out of our control. But if you're not saving up for maternity leave, you don't live in a district that penalizes you for taking sick days, but you still find it hard to take a day here and there, here are a few tips for you. Actually, I took the tips out, I think, because they're all up there now. Prepare for days off, decide how many to save for emergencies, and make a plan. What merits a sick day to you? I like to, tell my husband, hey, if I've got a fever of 101, don't let me go to work. And sometimes it's like, Jennifer, you got a fever, go back to bed, you're not going in. So he kind of helps hold me accountable. And I say, these are the things that merit a sick day for me. I do take my personal days, and I take all of them almost. And I make sure to not take them on days that's really going to stick it to the man or anything like, oh, we're doing testing later. I'm kind of reasonable about it, but go ahead to the next slide. If you clicked on, I think it's at the beginning of the chat, there is a Google Doc in there. Go ahead and click on that. If you haven't already, it should ask you to make a copy. And in there, you're going to find 4 different pages, but the one I want you to look at here is this first one, and this is going to be backwards, but it is the physical, emotional, spiritual, and vocational. And in that first spot, it says, how are you currently practicing physical self-care, and what are you doing well in this area? So maybe, thank you for reposting that. Maybe for you do park in the back of the parking lot. Maybe you tried to take a class at the Y or your health center. Maybe you are involved in maybe you are in a weight loss program. Whatever it is, how are you doing in terms of your physical activity? How are you doing well? And then what are some things that you're struggling with in terms of physical self-care? And this is just a way to reflect. I'm going to give you just a minute to look at those and think about it. And you guys all have your own individual pages to use. Let's go ahead and come back. We are going to move on to the next section. The first two take forever. The last two fly right by. Go ahead to the next slide for me. Emotional and mental. Emotional and mental health does not mean being happy all the time, or that toxic positivity. Being emotionally healthy means that you can experience and manage your emotions. The teacher world, especially on social media, and I know that's a big point for a lot of us, is filled with platitudes about staying positive and choosing happy. And of course, it's good to be positive, and I hope that you are happy most of the time. But ultimately, experiencing a range of emotion is part of being human. And if you're upset about a situation, trying to force yourself to be happy about it generally doesn't fix the situation. Oftentimes, we can do positive self-talk and those things, but if it's a real situation, those work for small things. But if it's a real situation or it's something that's really bothering us, we might need to do something a little bit deeper. So I like to say that being off in our feelings indicates that something's wrong. It's like the check engine light. And so if we're feeling frustrated or stressed or angry or overwhelmed, there's nothing inherently wrong with those emotions. But a lot of people like to find those as, quote, the negative emotions. I'm feeling negative, but there's nothing inherently wrong with those. We need to acknowledge and accept our emotions and then consider what we can do to manage or improve them. So it's kind of like not just forcing those things to go away. Like I said, it's not about allowing negative thoughts to overtake us, but we can try to sneak in positive thoughts. And if we find that it's something deeper than just something that we can be like, oh, come on. Like right before this, I had to print a few things off and it wasn't working. And so I stopped and I was like, oh, it's not, like I wanted to blow a gasket, but instead I was like, come on, Haston, pull it together. You are a competent person. You can do this. It's going to be fine. And here we are. So I didn't get the things printed off and it kind of threw me into a tizzy, but we're going to make it work. These are just a few things. I really just have a friend who, when they're feeling negative, they're like, send me videos of somebody falling. And I'm like, that's really weird, but it cheers her up. So I'll send her like Old America's Funniest Home Videos of people trying to slide down steps and falling off. I can't watch that stuff. It like cringe, and not the cool new modern way of cringe, but like the actual definition of like, I can't watch it. Turn it off. But I do like to watch kittens for some reason. So whatever works, find something that works. Another thing is answer slowly and think before answering. I think that's big for me. And sometimes I'll be asked a question and I'll respond with, that's a really good question. And then I'll just stare at them and they look at me like I'm insane. I'm like, I want to make sure I don't give you an answer that comes from someplace that I don't want it to come from. So there's a lot of different things here that we can use, but the next one I'm going to give you, and there's a sheet in here. We're about to get real cheesy. And I know this is a point that a lot of people, they want to do, but go ahead to the next slide. But they find that they're feeling kind of odd. So the most important part of self-care is a mindset shift of prioritizing your own well-being. Like I said, platitudes like student first and in it for the outcome, not the income, might be well-intentioned, but I prefer this quote. I don't know if it's an actual quote, but it is now because I'm saying it. What's good for students is good for teachers. For many of us, the idea that we are deserving of as much care and love as our students is a radical one. And so I think we've all heard, like we've told our students, would you talk to yourself, talk to yourself like you're your best friend. Would you talk to your best friends the way that you're talking to yourself? But we don't take that on advice. We are kind of used to the feeling that doing what's best for kids or being successful means collapsing, exhausted, and uncared for into bed at the end of the night. And then practicing self-care can be a significant mindset shift and not always an easy or comfortable one. I use these and I keep them at my desk next to a mirror for anybody that comes into my room that are complaining. I don't really look in the mirror much anymore because I know what I look like, and these things are like memorized into my brain. But ultimately, affirmations become the way that we speak to ourselves, and speaking to ourselves in a calm, supportive way instead of berating ourselves is a really powerful thing. And hear me tell you that I understand that it's going to be uncomfortable if this isn't something that you typically do. It's going to be uncomfortable to say affirmations out loud at first. And I completely understand if it feels weird or cheesy, but it does make a big difference. And if you start to feel this way, it's a way of catching yourself in that negative spiral and then trying to pull yourself out of it. Because a lot of the negativity that we experience in our minds comes from a place of feeling inadequate. If we really dig down deep enough, it kind of exposes our fears and worries about who we are and where we fall short. And so if we can kind of pick ourselves back up, it makes a big difference. Go ahead to the next slide. As a mindfulness and meditation instructor, I know that with SEL and everything in the world right now, we kind of see these things, but mindfulness is the awareness that arises when we pay attention on purpose in the present moment with curiosity and kindness to things how they are. So it's not about pushing away feelings that we don't want to feel. It's not about being tired and being like, yeah, but I gotta stay up 4 more hours to get this IEP done. It's about noticing that you're feeling the way that you're feeling, sitting with it for a minute and trying to figure out where it comes from instead of just ignoring it and moving on to whatever's next. Go ahead to the next slide. And I want you guys to close your eyes for just a second. How much time do we have?
About 8 minutes.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, more than that, a little bit more than that.
Okay.
About 10 to 12, probably, I guess.
Perfect. All right, everybody close your eyes if you want to. I can't see you, so I won't know if you're staring at me, but close your eyes, take a deep breath, exhale. And I want you to imagine it's summertime, late July. You're on a small dock on the edge of a peaceful lake. You're sitting on the wooden boards, your legs dangling over the water. It's a warm day, and you can feel the heat of the sun on your skin and face. There's a refreshing drink in your hand, and you can feel the coolness of the glass contrasting with the heat of the day. A light breeze blows across the water, stirring your hairs on your arms. The breeze carries the faint smell of the reeds, earth, and the lake water. A cloud passes over the sun, and then a cooler breeze blows across the water and gives you a slight shiver, reminding you that the summer is quickly passing. The new year will begin soon, and you recall that you still have some course planning to do when you get back, and you start to wonder about the new classes and students you will teach. I wonder if Tommy made it home at the end of the day last year. Will the textbooks arrive on time? And some of the jobs that you left undone at the end of the year, are we getting new iPads? Did I get my computer updated? I never did clean out all those old files. Oh, shoot, I was going to make that new bulletin board. Did I order that giant box of crayons I was going to get? Whether or not you actually felt any sensations, go ahead and open your eyes. You probably noticed what happened. We moved from full-on present moment sensory experiencing to into thinking, planning, and preparing the future with our internal narrative mode. Go ahead to the next slide. There are 2 main brain modes of the mind, sensing and thinking, and they can be observed in action using brain scans, but we all have the capacity to experience our senses and to move into our thoughts, and we flip from one to the other and back again, usually without even noticing. Most of us, however, spend a lot of time living in that thinking and conceptual part of our brain and in that inner storytelling, and not so much experiencing the present moment directly through our senses. And that's what mindfulness is. It brings us back to the moment, and we can kind of drop into our attention into the body and know what's happening right before us in a classroom, whether it's a situation with 2 students or a situation with 1 student or a situation with somebody else in the building. So having the capacity, mindfulness is a practice, and it's not something that comes easy. I do have meditation classes, and I just give them for free because I think it's so important for everybody. So if that's something that you're interested in, learning to kind of do some mindfulness meditations, feel free to shoot me a message and we can figure something out. But having the capacity to step out of that thinking conceptual and flip on the sensing immediately and leave everything else behind, even if it's just for 10 seconds, and then coming back in allows us the opportunity to clear our head and come from a more rational place instead of a place of irrationality. So I find it to be very important. Take a screenshot of this. You guys all have the slides. The next slide for me. These are different ways that it's not just about kind of sitting in. These are all benefits of mindfulness meditations, which are very important. I have each one of these, I believe, clicks to a study. I don't know if I put those URLs in there, but it should click to a study. If not, I have that in another slide I can send to you too. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, cool. So yes, I took those out. There we go. I'm sorry, I'm going to have you go back. Fantastic. Gratitude. That's what we're going to talk about now. Again, coming from the gratitude journal world, I think this is fantastic. When you start to feel maybe jealous of someone else's life, you can accept and acknowledge the feeling, but then also let the feeling be a trigger to remind you to be thankful for things that you are grateful for in your own life. For example, if you find yourself thinking, well, I wish I only had 20 kids in my class like Mr. So-and-so, or if you're thinking, man, they get the window and I don't have any windows in my room, it's like a dungeon in here. Or if you're like, oh, why am I one of two other teachers that have recess duty and nobody else has it this year? You can kind of accept that feeling, right? Because all of our feelings are valid, but then also express gratitude for the positive things in your own classroom. I go ahead to the next slide for me. I put on here to say thank you to your students. Only because, which I know sometimes seems like, yeah, duh, but I read a classroom management book that said not to thank your students because it will make them feel like what you tell them is optional. Again, I call BS. Research has shown that being thanked motivates people to engage in more helpful acts. And I know this was a big thing. I had quite a few teachers come through, like new teachers who are transitioning into teaching, and they're like, yeah, we were told not to say thank you to our students. And I was like, that is mind-boggling to me. So if you are a teacher who went through school and you were told not to say thank you to your students, I'm going to challenge that, because thanking your students will benefit your own well-being and will hopefully encourage your students to continue to be helpful and engage in the behavior you want them to engage in. And you would be surprised, I would say no less than 25 times working in different schools have I heard teachers say, don't say thank you to students because they will think what you're asking them to do is optional. It's mind-boggling to me, but it's a real thing. So I want to make sure I touch on that. Go ahead to the next slide. Self-love and compassion, self-compassion. What if I told you we should treat ourselves as we would each student? How would we treat a student if they were down, disappointed in themselves, or anxious? We wouldn't berate them the way that sometimes we do. We would comfort them and treat them gently. If all else fails and you look through these things and you're like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, read a Brene Brown book. That's my advice. She's fantastic. Follow her on social media. All of her posts will really get you kind of thinking if you think that some of these other things aren't going to work for you. Go ahead to the next slide. This here, I'm not going to, was there not one before that? Nope. All right, cool. So I'm just going to say it then. We need to acknowledge that what is good for ourselves, what is good for others is good for ourselves. If we want so badly to care for others, if we want others to be happy and healthy, are we too not worthy of caring and happiness? And that's what I believe is at the heart of the mindset shift needed to truly take care of ourselves. We have to start with the recognition that we are worthy of caring, and we have to be kind of recognize that we're worthy of being happy, and self-love is really at the heart of self-care. So go ahead to the next slide. Those are our key takeaways. I'm going to give you, I swiped. This is why I've always controlled. Go back, go back for me, and go ahead and hit that Google Doc if you want to. We'll just give you just a minute to kind of reflect on what you're doing in terms of practicing emotional self-care, and then what ways you're struggling with emotional self-care. Let's go ahead and come back. Let's tackle spiritual. If you are a religious person, you likely already know the benefits of having a spiritual practice. Whether you are religious or not, connecting with your spiritual side and feeling that sense of peace and wholeness is important for your overall well-being. While the exact effects of a spiritual practice are hard to measure, studies of religious and spiritual interventions have found that these interventions decrease stress and depression. Again, it's kind of hard to measure spiritual practices, but there is a direct correlation between lower stress and lower depression. Many studies have found that overall increase of well-being associated with religious and spiritual interventions. I have several teacher friends who tell me that them going to church on Sunday mornings has made their entire week feel better. For me, when I meditate in the mornings or I say my affirmations, I can tell you it changes my entire mindset. I know immediately, like if there's something off in me or something happens, I'm like, almost always I either woke up late and didn't meditate, or I didn't listen to something that I would typically listen to. My whole day is kind of thrown off if I don't do that. And if I'm really feeling it, I live close to Brown County, so I always go find myself in the woods somewhere, wander around for a bit if I need to. And to me, that's my form of spiritual self-care, finding myself in nature and meditating. But again, like I've got lots of friends who sometimes I will just say, hey, ride to work in silence. Sometimes that's a form of mental self-care, but it's also a form of spiritual self-care, depending on kind of the thoughts that are going through your head. Maybe they're just praying on their way to work to them or to whatever they believe in or whoever they believe in. Completing a vision board can sometimes be a spiritual practice. There's a big overlapping in the two. So it's kind of just what works for you. If you go to the next slide, there are different kinds of, if you're not sure where to start, here are some places you can start, but it's really a deeply personal thing. And I think the most important part is finding something that works for you and that you find feels better. So if you try something for like 3 weeks and you're like, this is doing nothing for me, try something different. Find something that works. I have the quiet time, connections with people who believe in similar things that you do, I think is important. For me, meditate, journaling, and spending time in nature are my big three. Go ahead to the next. Why don't you take a minute to maybe think about, and you can, if you want to leave that last slide up, I know we've been going to the slide, but if you want to leave that last slide up, I find that a lot of people kind of struggle with the spiritual side of things. They're not quite sure what to put down of what they're doing well and what they can do better. And maybe you guys have something in mind, but here's just a couple things that I'm going to leave up here for you as you're looking to reflect on your spiritual practice. It's not a lot of time to think, but let's come back for vocational. This is the one I added, and now I'm looking at time and I'm like, man, I really thought I could do it, but we're gonna zip through this because I know a lot of you have got to get back to your vocation. So vocational self-care is having a fulfilling job that's a good fit for you. So the big thing on here is say no when you need to. No one is going to intervene for you and insist that no, you can't do the extra IEP, or no, you're not going to sub in another class with no notice because you quite frankly can't. Your school, your principal, your coworkers, they're not going to stop you from burning yourself out and becoming bitter and tired. If they need you, they're going to ask you, and they're going to leave it to you to say yes or no. You are responsible for your own well-being, and that's a serious responsibility. Right or wrong, people aren't going to stop demanding things from you anytime soon. And so having the ability to say no is really important because no one else is going to say no for you. And so I think that's something that's very difficult for a lot of people, but it's important to learn how to do those things. Stressors. I want you to take a minute to think about points of frustration for you. And this is a part on the self-care plan. I'm really going to tell you to come back to that self-care plan that I sent you guys as a Google Doc and look at some of those things because it's really important. Take a minute to think about, and I put on here points of frustration and then solutions to the frustrations, because we can think about all the things that bother us all day, and we don't often try to think of solutions to those things. But taking a minute to think about them, is the copier always broken? Can you make copies further ahead of time so broken machines won't derail your whole day? That was my situation just a few minutes ago. Can you make fewer copies by projecting questions on the board and having students record their answers on paper? Is there a specific teacher who's always late to picking up kids from your class for specials? Maybe sit down and have an honest conversation with that teacher and make sure to have a backup plan in case the conversation isn't effective. So like I said, there's always frustrations, but to me, there's always ways around those frustrations. Find the marigolds. I love planting and gardening, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's all over the cult of pedagogy and the teacherverse, but marigolds protect a wide variety of plants from pests and weeds. So if you plant a marigold right next to certain vegetables, then the plant will grow big and strong and healthy, usually. So the tomatoes are protected and encouraged by the marigold. What does this mean? Avoid gossip and negative people. And so I think if we find that person in our building that we can complain and vent to, but who doesn't feed into it, but is like, oh yeah, that sucks. Well, you know, maybe have you thought about this, or have you thought about this? Instead of being like, yeah, you know what they did to me the other day? You wouldn't believe that lady. Oh, don't get me started. For me, I do not have lunch in the lunchroom. To me, that seems, every time I've been in there, I have not had a positive experience. And then what happens is I hear teachers venting about kids, and then I pop in and I'm like, hey, have you thought about this with the kid? Maybe they're experiencing this. And they just look at me like, this is a venting session. Clearly, we don't want solutions to this. Gotcha. But for me, I just always like to I avoid gossip and negativity as much as possible. I don't need, Kayla's on it. She doesn't either. Not that I'm against it, because I think community is important, as long as they're marigold community. You're a community of marigolds and tomatoes. Okay, diffuse tension is the only other one I'm going to touch on this page. Come back to me. I, for one, have zero issues with confrontation, but I work with a lot of introverts and people with a lot of social anxiety. So tense situations between coworkers could sometimes be a huge source of stress for people. You know, maybe you're co-teaching with someone you don't really get along with, but I'm going to say communication can solve or at least de-escalate a lot of the situations. The problem is we don't have honest conversations. Sometimes we tend to get maybe passive aggressive if we don't handle situations before they get, you know, rather than ignoring or retaliating by gossiping, or imagine yourself kicking them in the nose or something. Try sitting down with the coworker in question and just having an honest conversation and saying, you know what? This is how I'm feeling. And I know it's super awkward and uncomfortable to have that, but it's really professional, and clearing the air now will lead to a healthy environment for everyone. And like I said, including kids know if there's tension in the room between you and an aide, or, you know, a co-teacher, or you and the art teacher, you know, just small little comments that you accidentally say that you don't mean to. Also, use your personal days. Take a day off to watch Netflix uninterrupted, or to have lunch with an important person. In your self-care plan, go ahead to the next slide, you will see boundaries to set. I highly recommend, if you're like, I'm not clicking on the Google Doc, I'm not going to do that, then get your phone out and take a picture of this screen right here and really set boundaries, because it's critical and extremely difficult for many teachers to do. We can easily get behind the self-care idea of treat yourself and getting a pedicure once in a while, or maybe going to the gym or something, but it's harder to set firm boundaries and stick to them. That is one of the most important parts about not being burnout, is being able to set boundaries. If you don't set boundaries, it becomes burdens. I think everything that you do becomes a burden, and you work early mornings, late nights, through your lunches and sick days. It's not fair and it's not effective. The martyr teacher will end up leaving the profession, and if they don't, they just become kind of bitter and sometimes disillusioned, and that's unfortunate. So set some boundaries. You kind of probably have your own unique boundaries to add. If you're a special ed teacher, maybe it's not to spend more than 2 hours a night on an IEP. Setting those boundaries is the first step. Sticking to them is the next and much harder step. So just remember that there's no prize for having the last car in the parking lot. And to maybe set these boundaries and post them somewhere where you're going to see them. Stick them in a journal, put them on your mirror, put them like above your visor. So when you pull it down to check your teeth before you walk in the building, you'll see your boundaries set there, whatever you do. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to let you guys fill that in kind of on your own time, but because we're short on time, I imagine, yes. Yes, we're right there on time. So within that document I sent you, you will see, I think this is going to blur it out maybe, but you will see a self-care plan. And each one of these has the topics that we just covered throughout the session. We ended every category by reflecting on our current self-care and then identifying self-care things that we can work on. now it's time to put everything together to create that self-care plan. I want you guys to use I statements when you do that, because it helps affirm your plans and build loyalty to yourself, which is really important. Think about your own self-care plan, using those prompts that I put on that sheet. Be kind to yourself when you're writing your goals. Don't put something like, I'm a lazy slob and I wish I wasn't. Put things like you're putting it on a resume. Say instead, I'm struggling to find the motivation to move. Kind of word them in ways that you're not criticizing yourself. Display it somewhere that you'll see it regularly. I like to give mine to my marigold and say, hey, here's my self-care plan. Here are my boundaries. Remind me of these if you see me not doing the things that I ought to do. It's not set in stone, but also remember that if you're like, I'd like to go for a run every single day, but you're not a person who runs, make sure that you adjust your plan and maybe run once a week and start there. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good when you guys are making this. Go ahead to the next slide. I think it's the end. That's your self-care plan. Yep. Ultimately, the decision's up to you to prioritize your well-being. This was rushed at the end, but I think we made it through everything. There's your affirmations. Don't forget to say them. They're on that list also. You can't sustain yourself on high test scores and coffee alone. So that's, if you take away nothing, take away that. And also use your sick days and personal days.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and add those into the chat as we kind of close out the session. We can take a look at those and maybe Jennifer can help answer those questions. I did want to share, we have a link here in this slide. So if you are in the slide deck, just go ahead and click on that link if you want to fill out a very short evaluation. And then in doing so, you will also be able to receive a PGP point for your participation in today's session. So check out that link. And then last, certainly not least, I wanted to share just a couple of things coming up. We have a summer all virtual conference in June. It is $35 to register. Sessions will be available starting in June all the way through June of 2024. So for 1 year, you'll have access to those virtual sessions. So you do not have to attend the conference live in June. You can register and then watch those sessions later on during the school year or whenever it's convenient for you. So be sure to check that out. Also wanted to share specifically for counselors, we are offering several things next school year, and we will be sharing more information about those things in the upcoming newsletter, Counselor Connect monthly newsletter. So be sure to subscribe if you aren't subscribed already to receive those updates. With that, here is my contact information. I know Jennifer shared hers earlier on a couple of slides ago. And I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. I'm not seeing any. Jennifer, did you see any above? I don't think so. Nope.
I do see some people who said, send me some things, but I don't have your, if I click on their name, will I see any email? No. Okay.
If you want to, you can just email me the resource that you mentioned, and then I can send a follow-up email to everybody with that information.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully everybody will have a wonderful end to your school year. Take care, everybody.
Bye.